The reason having more only leaves us wanting more boils down to one single thing: novelty, an exciting feeling associated with things we have recently acquired. But why do we feel that excitement? It is because our brain registers every moment on discovering anything new until there is nothing else left to uncover. Soon, our brain starts ignoring the moments provided by this new thing, and before we realize, the novelty diminishes. What was interesting a few weeks ago has now become boring. In fact, it is due to diminishing novelty that time feels faster with growing age. Unlike our childhood that is full of novel experiences, the mundane moments that define our adulthood are anything but boring. These boring moments are simply ignored by our brain, making time seem to move faster. We can say that our brain needs newer things to keep our lives exciting.
Well, how do I scroll through my list of artists? I just take my finger and I scroll.
And the only way to revive the excitement is by acquiring something new again, only to repeat this futile cycle. This is what we call the hedonic treadmill, a psychological theory which says that people's long-term happiness may spike occasionally but returns to a baseline level. Once on board the hedonic treadmill, wanting more becomes a way of life which leads to dissatisfaction and unhappiness. The obvious question is, how do we stop ourselves from falling into the hedonic treadmill? And more importantly, can we really stop at all? Because unlike the 50s or the 60s, the current age consumerism is far from being subtle. It runs on FOMOs, easy credit, and all-knowing algorithms. In a world where compulsion of wanting more has a systemic origin, what can an individual do after all? The answer is a lot. Not on a systemic level, but on an individual one. This video gives you 4 points to help you avoid the obsession of novelty and slipping into the hedonic treadmill. But if avoidance isn't in your nature, stick around until the end and learn how to break free from this cycle of fleeting happiness while creating success. But before we get there, we must trace this tendency of wanting more back to its source: modern-day consumerism. Famous American scholar Herbert Simon and Barry Schwartz, a famous psychologist, categorized people into two groups: Maximisers and the Satisficers. Maximisers are people who want the best every time they are out to buy something. Their unyielding desire of wanting the best makes them ruminate and catch sad feelings quite often. On the other hand, Satisficers are happy with something that meets their minimum eligibility criteria. Unlike Maximisers who browse through options, a Satisficer will end their search even if the first option meets their criteria. Simply put, Satisficers are more utilitarian while the Maximisers like their things superlative. Simon said that because humans have limited cognitive abilities, most of us are Satisficers. In other words, a majority of us settle for things that gets the job done. However, Simon gave this theory around 1950s. Consumerism back then was different in scope and scale. It focused on essentials and aspirational goods that provided long-term happiness and a sense of accomplishment. But those aspirational things have become unaffordable over time. Now, the sense of accomplishment has shifted to acquiring multiple items. These items are not impossible to obtain, but not effortless either. Simply put, they feel worthy enough to strive for. The problem with this devolved form of consumerism is that it can only provide a fleeting satisfaction. Unlike buying a home or obtaining a college degree, items like smartphone or fast fashion apparels demand cyclical buying to sustain that happy feeling. By conspicuously facilitating temptation, competition, and comparison, the new age consumerism has made our lives a pursuit of consumption. A life where the more we have, the more we want. But we can fight this systemic onslaught if we are willing to develop some basic awareness about ourselves. And the first step is by learning to choose consciously. Choosing consciously is the first step towards dodging the hedonic treadmill. It is the art of acquiring stuff that really matters. For most things in life, people tend to choose like a satisficer, choosing things good enough to get the job done. However, in a world full of temptations, the satisficer mindset is often overpowered by information and offers from multiple sources. In psychology, we call it the availability heuristic, which is defined as our tendency of using readily available information to make decisions. Choosing consciously begins by stopping these messages. Hence, the first step is to cut down on unnecessary emails, phone calls, and notifications that push us into this rabbit hole. However, availability heuristic isn't the only obstacle towards conscious choosing. The way we perceive gain and loss can also push us into this unyielding loop. Ever seen those videos where you either choose between cash or a mystery gift? It is seen that people often take risks and go for the mystery gift when the offered cash is of lesser value. But as soon as the value of the cash goes up, people ditch the mystery gift and settle for the cash price instead. This shows that our sense of gain and loss is not absolute but relative instead. Relative value triggers FOMOs, making it hard to cultivate a mindset of choosing consciously. Because we are more sensitive to losses, we try to prevent them as much as possible, be it a large sum of money or items sold on discounts. A famous event that vividly demonstrated this phenomenon was the launch of the iPad. Impressed by a big screen, people fell for the discounted price tag of $499 against $999 proposed at the beginning of the presentation. People were forced to compare the two values and could not resist ordering one for themselves, irrespective of whether they needed one or not. But relative value does not stop at comparing two items. It goes further. In order to feel accomplished, we compare the things we own against what others have in their possession. Such a life governed by mental comparison and social validation is bound to be miserable. People can compare what they have versus what they want, or what others have but they do not. Comparison severely affects Maximisers than Satisficers. It is because Satisficers have got absolute standards. Anything Satisficers acquire goes back to their long-term goals. On the other hand, a Maximizer may be acquiring things fast only to level up with their friends, peer group, or society at large. With a mindset like that, one cannot help but fall for the recent trends and end up borrowing identities. And these identities are expensive to sustain. It is said that if you listen to everyone's opinion, you will be lost. This stands true today more than it has ever been. If you pause for a moment and observe, you'll notice that we are targeted by an unending stream of narratives every day, coming from influencers, politicians, and algorithms. These narratives are always trying to define who we really are. Any chance for individuals to be able to connect and define themselves in the middle of this deafening noise is challenging. Hence, the majority of people cannot help but identify with this noise. They end up accepting this collective identity, which was never theirs to begin with. Taking on other people's ideas and making them our own paves way for a life without intent and illusionary goals. This is what some people call accidental living. People who are onto a pursuit of consumption cannot help from slipping into accidental living. At this point, the plethora of choices offered by modern consumerism does not provide the freedom to choose, but instead becomes an identity trap. In his book The Paradox of Choice, Barry Schwartz says that choice has expressive value, but only to the point where we can make them freely. Hence, any choice that is made to conform to a society, community, or a trend is not a choice anymore. Schwartz compares this condition with marital vows in a conservative society, where the vow becomes the identity of the society instead of the individual. Sadly, the present-day consumerism is all about the illusion of choice, where people are compelled to partake in the pursuit of consumption, leaving them dissatisfied and wanting more. Regardless of how many times we acquire new things, the novelty associated with those things diminishes eventually. Now, if you hate your brain for being a fun killer, don't, because there's a helpful part to all of this as well. By now, we have come to vilify the idea of adaptation, the most defining aspect of modern consumerism. However, adaptation has a dual nature. Yes, not only can it erode the novelty of a new thing, but can also heal your mental pain from a catastrophic event. For example, a person who got paralyzed is going to feel the majority of despair in the first few months to a year. Eventually, they returned to the same level of happiness before they got into this condition. A study from 1978 has proven this phenomenon already. In this study, researchers discovered that both lottery winners and individuals with paraplegia returned to their baseline happiness after their respective life-changing moments. It appears that not only do we have the choice to experience happiness, but also the ability to make a comeback from a catastrophic event. I personally think that adaptation teaches a simple truth, which is both happy and sad feelings are temporary and fade with time. It is interesting to see that despite our resilience in overcoming disaster, we take precautions to avoid problems that cause unhappiness. Yet, ironically, we willingly cultivate our own unhappiness by overindulging in fleeting pleasures. Understandably, life has to make sense in the end. After all, the money, the drudgery, and the inconvenience cannot be for nothing. And in this longing, there is nothing we can do but become a maximizer to end up unhappy and empty. However, it need not be like that forever. People can cultivate lasting happiness, and they can do so by refocusing their obsession from consumption to something else. The idea of quitting the pursuit of consumption always boils down to a state of existence or some archetype, and that archetype is that of a hermit, the ultimate minimalist. But we cannot expect people to live a hermetic life. Truth be told, we all need at least some level of indulgence from time to time. Hence, what is practical is to live a life with intent, which is the opposite of accidental living. Living a life with intent allows us to divest our obsessive tendencies from consumption onto creative pursuits, exploration, and discovery. In fact, living with intent simply diminishes the line between maximizers and satisficers and allows both tendencies to exist in balance. Just look at some famous names who gave birth to revolutionary things and ideas. They are neither maximizers nor satisficers. For example, Steve Jobs' uncompromising attitude towards design and usability of products may project him as a maximizer. In contrast, however, his lifestyle resembles that of a satisficer who was content with simple possessions. Conclusively, living with intent allows people to proportionately channel their obsession towards the right things. They tend to pursue different goals and do them for a long haul. These people usually have higher levels of serotonin and oxytocin, neurotransmitters that provide the mental endurance to chase long-term success. This is opposite to consumption, which is characterized by dopamine often ending with cortisol, making us grumpy in the end. Unlike accidental living, a life lived with intent unfolds slowly throughout our entire lifetime. There is learning, setbacks, evolution of oneself, and finally, achievement of goals. While accidental living offers only diminishing novelty, an intent-based life allows people to experience novelty as a perpetual state of mind, a feeling that is unattainable through the trivial pursuit of acquiring things alone. Please like, share, and subscribe if you loved the content.